The city woke before the sun, as it always did. Cars sang on wide roads, glass buildings caught the early light, and screens blinked with news and numbers. Yet beneath the sound of engines and phones, old whispers still moved like wind through tall grass. Elders greeted the morning with quiet prayers. Market women poured libation at street corners before opening their stalls. In this city, feet walked forward, but hearts still looked back. Tradition did not shout here, it waited. And waiting, it listened. Among the people lived a woman whose name carried warmth. When she passed, greetings followed her like birds. She spoke softly, but her words settled deeply. She helped widows without asking for praise and fed street children as if they were her own. In family matters, she was the calm fire that cooked peace. Elders nodded when she spoke. Neighbors said, "Her hands are clean, and her heart is steady." Like women in old stories, she held balance where others brought noise. One afternoon, while the city argued with itself in horns and heat, fate stretched out its invisible hand. The woman paused mid-step, as if listening to a voice only she could hear. Her body swayed. A basket fell. The ground rushed up to meet her. People shouted. Someone cried her name. Fear spread faster than help. Fate did not explain itself. It never does. It only acts. At the hospital, the air changed. Machines hummed like distant drums. Lights glowed cold and bright. Here, breath was counted, and silence had weight. Nurses moved with purpose, as if walking a narrow bridge between worlds. An elder visitor whispered, "This place is not only for the body. Spirits pass through here too." The woman lay still, her chest rising like a slow tide. Life hovered, unsure which shore to choose. Her husband arrived wrapped in sorrow. He was known in the city as a man of standing, careful with words and generous in public. He held her hand and bowed his head. "My wife," he said softly, for all to hear. People murmured sympathy. Cameras of memory recorded his grief. Yet behind his eyes, a storm moved without rain. When alone, his breath quickened. He stared at the machines as if they held answers he did not want to ask. "Will she wake?" he whispered to no one. The question frightened him more than the silence. In corners where light thinned, another heart beat fast. The lover stayed hidden, moving like smoke along walls. Desire and hunger sat together inside her chest. She watched from distance, counting days and chances. "Fate has opened a door," she told herself, though the words tasted bitter. In old tales, shadows grow when lamps are weak. Her thoughts fed on what might be gained, not on what was right. Outside, the city kept walking. Inside, a woman slept between breath and silence. Somewhere beyond sound, ancestors leaned closer, listening. The ground remembered her kindness. The wind carried her name. And fate, having struck once, waited to strike again, when the time would hurt the most. The news of her condition moved faster than the evening wind. By the next morning, elders had gathered in small circles, leaning on walking sticks, speaking in low voices. Relatives came with faces tight like tied knots. Some spoke with care, others with curiosity dressed as concern. "A woman like her holds a family together," one aunt said. Another replied, "Yes, but fate does not ask permission." Words traveled from mouth to mouth, growing longer with each step. In this community, tongues did not only talk, they judged. And judgment, once spoken, had the power to bend tomorrow. An elder cleared his throat and raised a palm. "We must wait," he said. "When the river is troubled, the wise do not cross." Yet waiting made many uneasy. Waiting meant no answers. Waiting meant fear. So people whispered instead. Some blamed stress, others jealousy, others unseen spirits offended by modern pride. Each whisper pressed lightly on fate, as if fate could be pushed. Inside the hospital, hope began to thin. Doctors stood at the foot of the bed, their faces heavy. One spoke gently to the husband. "We have done what we can," he said. "Her body rests, but her spirit does not answer." The words fell like stones. The room felt smaller. The husband nodded, tears shining for those watching. "So, there is nothing?" he asked. The doctor paused. "Hope is small," he replied. Small was enough for some to let go, and for others to begin planning. When the healers of the body stepped back, opportunity stepped forward. Silence filled the space they left behind. That silence wrapped the husband and the hidden lover in the same cloth. They began to stand closer, speak softer. "We must be practical," the lover whispered when no one listened. "Life does not wait." The husband swallowed. "People will ask questions," he said. "We must be ready." Fear joined ambition, and secrecy sealed their bond. The woman's stillness became their shelter. In corners meant for prayer, new whispers grew sharp. "The houses," the lover murmured. "The land." The husband hesitated. "It is not right," he said, though his voice lacked strength. "It is necessary," she replied. They spoke of futures while a present breath still rose and fell nearby. The sacred space of illness was stained by plans that smelled of metal and dust. Greed wore the mask of care. "I am thinking of the family," he told himself. Lies are strongest when spoken first to the heart. Soon, numbers replaced names. "The burial must be decent," the lover said. "People watch." The husband nodded. "Yes, and the accounts." They counted houses while a heart still beat. In old stories, elders warn that when the drum of death is played too early, it invites misfortune. But the drumbeat in their minds grew louder. Outside, relatives argued and waited. Inside, fate listened. Through it all, the woman lay quiet. Some called her silence the end. Others felt it was a test. In the language of ancestors, silence is not emptiness, it is gathering. Like a seed under dry soil, strength rested unseen. If heroes must fall before they rise, then this was her falling. And as plans hardened and whispers sharpened, the night prepared it. Its answer, slowly, patiently, because justice, in African wisdom, never runs. The elders came again, their steps slow, their faces heavy with words that carried weight. One lifted his staff and spoke as if repeating something old. "When fate closes a door, the wise do not knock," he said. The husband nodded quickly, holding on to the sentence as if it were a rope. "Yes," he replied, louder than needed. "The elders say we must let her rest." Others murmured agreement. But rest was twisted into release, and release into surrender. Tradition, once meant to calm the heart, was sharpened and turned into a blade. Not all elders agreed, but only the loud words traveled. Wisdom, when cut from its roots, becomes a weapon. In the family room, calm sat on the surface like oil on water. Beneath it, cracks widened. An aunt folded her arms and whispered, "Why the hurry?" A cousin glanced around before answering, "People are watching." Silence bought safety. Speaking truth invited trouble. Some feared shame, others hoped for reward. Like a calabash dropped on stone, the family split along hidden lines. No one wanted to be the hand that picked up the broken pieces. Pressure pressed harder than love, and fear kept many mouths closed. Among the white walls and humming machines moved a nurse with quiet eyes. She did not speak much, but she watched everything. She noticed the way breaths changed, the way hands warmed, the way silence sometimes answered back. When she adjusted the blanket, she whispered, "Stay with us." No one heard her except the woman who slept. In old tales, fate often chooses a small voice to carry a big truth. The nurse carried hers with humility, not knowing where it would lead. One morning, as light crept in, the woman's fingers twitched. It was small, like a leaf shaking without wind. The nurse froze, then leaned closer. A breath deepened. Another followed. She called softly, "Doctor." The husband waved it away. "She has done that before," he said, not looking. Greed makes eyes dull. What should have been a bell became a whisper lost in noise. Moral blindness thickened the air. Outside, vultures circled high, their shadows sliding across roofs. An old cleaner crossed herself and muttered, "They know." At night, the guilty did not sleep. The husband woke sweating, seeing his wife stand at the doorway, silent, watching. The lover dreamed of hands pulling her down into red earth. Dreams, the elders say, are letters from ancestors. These letters were ignored. By day, the husband wore grief like fine cloth. He bowed to visitors. "Pray for us," he said. His eyes shone for the crowd. Behind closed doors, a thin smile appeared. The lover squeezed his hand. "Soon," she whispered. Appearance stood tall, truth crouched low. The city moved on. Buses honked. Shops opened. Screens flashed. In quiet rooms, betrayal grew like rot beneath polished floors. The woman breathed. The nurse watched. The ancestors waited. And somewhere between noise and silence, justice gathered its strength. The elders spoke again, this time with firmer voices. They sat in a half-circle, faces lined by years and truth. One elder said, "Wisdom is a lamp. Those who turn away will walk in shadows." Another added, "Do not rush what the ancestors have not finished." Their words hung in the air, heavy and clear. But the husband heard only what pleased him. He nodded, smiled, and later repeated only the parts that served his plans. Respect for wisdom bent under ambition. In the old order, elders guided fate. Now fate was being pushed aside. When advice is cut to fit desire, tradition loses its spine. In private, the husband and the lover spoke in careful tones. "We must be responsible," he said, pacing the room. "People expect decisions." She answered quickly, "Yes, we are being practical. Life must move forward." They wrapped greed in clean words and called it duty. Each lie made the next one easier. "We are protecting the family," he whispered, and believed it because he needed to. In African tales, the first person a lie deceives is the one who tells it. Their shield was self-deception, thin but comforting. While loud voices planned, a quiet pair of eyes watched. The nurse noticed how the woman's breathing changed with the light, how her chest rose stronger at dawn. She noticed warmth returning to cold fingers, a soft tightening when her name was spoken. She did not announce it to the world. She leaned close and said gently, "I see you." Quiet awareness stood against loud blindness. Fate, patient and clever, worked through the overlooked. One afternoon, life pressed back. A finger curled. A breath deepened. The nurse felt her heart jump. "There," she whispered, calling softly for attention. The husband glanced once and turned away. "It means nothing," he said. "Do not give false hope." Hope flickered like a small flame in wind and was almost blown out by denial. But flames, even small ones, remember how to grow. Night brought no rest to those who planted evil. The husband woke to the sound of drums that were not there. Sweat soaked his clothes. He saw his wife in dreams, not angry, just watching. The lover dreamed of vultures circling low, their wings blocking the sun. She woke with a cry, clutching her chest. Dreams are letters from ancestors, the elders say. These letters were written in fear and guilt, and they arrived every night. Far from their restless sleep, the woman's spirit traveled a long road. In the quiet place between worlds, she walked through memories of kindness given and strength held. Voices called her name, soft but firm. She remembered who she was. Like a seed breaking hard soil, her will pushed upward. Rebirth, in African wisdom, comes before justice, not after. Her body answered slowly, faithfully, as spirit and flesh reached for each other. As dawn returned, the nurse smiled to herself. "You are coming back," she said, not as a question. Outside, the city moved as always. Inside, the balance began to shift. The elders waited. The ancestors leaned closer. And though greed still spoke loudly, truth had begun to breathe. The city hummed with a rhythm that did not pause for sorrow. On the streets, vendors called their wares, cars moved in tireless patterns, and the sun painted the glass towers gold. Yet, amidst this normality, drums of death beat louder. People came to the house, offering condolences, folding hands, and lowering heads. Flowers were placed, wreaths arranged, and the black cloth of mourning hung from windows. Publicly, all seemed proper. Faces showed grief, eyes filled with tears. But behind doors, the air was heavy with doubt. The woman still breathed, yet the city prepared for an ending fate had not yet approved. Rumors traveled faster than anyone could walk. Whispers leaped from relatives to neighbors, from neighbors to elders, carrying half-truths and suspicion. "Did you see her today?" One woman asked another, voice low but urgent. "They say she may not last," the neighbor replied. "But the elders said to leave her in peace," came another voice. Oral tradition worked its magic, spreading warning and insight. The community began sensing the imbalance, an unease that pricked at hearts and minds alike. Stories grew in the telling, each adding weight to the invisible scales of justice and fate. Inside the household, the air felt thick and unsteady. Walls seemed to lean, as if burdened by unseen guilt. Sickness, fear, and tension made even those innocent tremble. A child coughed, a servant faltered in their steps. Everyone felt the wrong that had been done. In African wisdom, when moral balance tilts, it affects all under the same roof. Even those who sought only to care could not escape the heaviness. Whispers of fear passed silently from room to room, a shadow spreading across the heart of the house. Amid this, the nurse moved quietly. Her eyes caught what others ignored, the soft rise of a chest, the faint twitch of a finger. She bent close and whispered words meant only for the patient. In her humility, she carried courage. She became the mouth of hidden truth, the one who dared to see what others refused. Fate, ever selective, often chooses the least expected voice. Her steady vigilance became the thread by which hope might return, unseen yet unbroken. The hospital, usually a place of routine, became a battlefield of truth and convenience. Caregivers debated softly in corridors. Some wanted to honor life, others urged acceptance of the inevitable. Machines hummed like quiet witnesses to moral conflict. The white walls, cold and modern, contrasted with the ancient weight of decisions being made. Here, modernity met tradition, and both struggled under the weight of conscience. Lies and truths crossed paths in hallways, carrying tension into every room. The ancestors stirred. Shadows shifted in corners. The guilty awoke from uneasy dreams, tossing and turning as though unseen hands had touched them. Outside the patient's room, small signs appeared. A candle flickered without wind, a bird called sharply, and distant drums beat irregularly. Silence began to crack. Fate prepared to speak, pressing closer with each subtle warning. Every heartbeat, every breath in the room seemed amplified, as if the world itself leaned forward to witness the coming revelation. By the afternoon, burial preparations reached their final stage. Coffin polished, flowers arranged, plans written and repeated aloud. Neighbors nodded in expectation. The public was certain. Yet the fate of the woman remained unseen. Life lingered quietly beneath the surface. The contrast between public certainty and hidden truth created tension thick enough to taste. All waited, unknowingly, for the moment when the scales of justice would tip, and when the city, which had moved on without pause, would finally pay attention to what fate had kept hidden until now. A faint stir moved through the stillness of the room. A finger curled, ever so slightly, as if reaching for the world it had been denied. The chest rose, then sank, a quiet drumbeat that refused to obey the plans of those who had already measured the length of her life. Life pressed softly, insistently, against the fabric of death, and in that small rebellion, destiny reclaimed its voice. It was a single breath, yet it spoke louder than any words the greedy had uttered. The woman, silent for so long, began to write the first line of a story that would not end quietly. The nurse bent closer, eyes wide, heart pounding like a talking drum. She saw what no one else did, and her voice rose above the hum of machines and whispered fears. "She's waking," she cried, the words cutting through the hospital's quiet like lightning through night clouds. The sound startled everyone. Doctors froze, relatives gasped, and even the machines seemed to pause in recognition. One small, humble voice carried a truth so mighty that it shook the room, reminding all that African tales often place power in those who see and speak when the rest turn away. Silence spread like a tide. The room forgot how to breathe. Conversations died mid-word. The air thickened, heavy with astonishment. No one moved. Eyes widened, hands froze, and every heart held its pulse in collective wonder. The certainty of death, so carefully prepared, evaporated. In that moment, the people present felt the presence of forces older than themselves, the invisible ancestors who sometimes guide justice without fanfare, shaping fate in the smallest of acts. Faces betrayed what mouths could not. The husband's eyes flickered with panic, the lover's hands trembled where they rested on his arm. No confession was needed. The tilt of a head, a swallow too sharp, a sudden step back, truth showed itself in subtle movements. The room, though silent, spoke volumes. African justice, patient and unhurried, revealed guilt not through words but through the honesty of reaction. The ancestors watched as deception faltered, allowing truth to shine through cracks in human pretense. Lies collapsed like mud walls in the rain. Carefully woven deceptions, built over weeks of quiet plotting, fell piece by piece. Every whispered plan, every glance hidden from the world, now seemed fragile. As the truth rose naturally, the weight of injustice began to lift. The air felt lighter. Even the walls seemed to sigh. In African wisdom, falsehoods are brittle against the resilience of life, and this moment reminded all who were present that dishonesty cannot withstand the force of destiny. The elders stepped forward, voices firm with the authority of age and experience. "Enough," one said, cane tapping gently against the floor. "What is hidden cannot hide forever. Justice must return to its place." They addressed the husband, the lover, and all who had turned greed into action. Their words carried both sorrow and authority. Community justice replaced private scheming. Tradition, momentarily bent and twisted, reclaimed its true role, to guide, to correct, and to restore the balance that human ambition had disturbed. Finally, she rose. Not simply from a bed, but from the weight of silence and betrayal. Her eyes opened fully, reflecting calm strength and ancestral favor. Each movement was deliberate, as if the hands of generations guided her. She was returned, a phoenix reborn, a living symbol that life triumphs over plots and death cannot claim what is not yet ready to leave. In that awakening, the room exhaled, the city beyond paused, and the story of betrayal, greed, and silence reached the turning point that African tales always promise: the power of life, the weight of justice, and the certainty that truth, like the river, will find its path. The city, which had once moved blindly past sorrow, now paused as if caught in a sudden spell. Cars slowed, street vendors stopped mid-call, and glass buildings reflected a stillness unusual for their steel bones. News of the woman's awakening had spread, carried in whispers from street corners to office towers. People gathered on sidewalks, in shops, and outside homes, their faces drawn in astonishment. The public could no longer look away. Shame met truth in open eyes, and a collective breath seemed to hang above the streets. The city became witness, silent but piercing, as society confronted the weight of what had been hidden too long. In that stillness, the force of life asserted itself. Greed, so carefully nurtured in secret, collapsed under the brilliance of revelation. The husband and the lover, once confident in their whispered plots, now stood exposed, their faces betraying panic and confusion. The woman's strength, though quiet, was undeniable. Life had stood taller than their schemes. Justice, swift and impartial, arrived without warning, not as a sound of accusation but as the natural result of truth coming to light. The balance that had been disturbed began to restore itself, carried on the wings of resilience and ancestral favor. Recovery came in slow, deliberate steps. The woman's body, having flirted with the edge of death, demanded patience. She learned once more to sit, to walk, to breathe with ease. Each day brought clarity and awareness. There was no rush, no need to reclaim life in a frenzy. This was the sacred phase of survival, a gift to be honored. She moved with intention, feeling the world again through the lens of gratitude. Every step, every careful breath, reminded her and those around her that life, when nearly lost, is to be revered, not wasted. The husband and his accomplice found shame walking louder than their footsteps. In public and in private, their reputations crumbled. Social circles whispered, neighbors stared, and the eyes of the community, once blind, now weighed them with unrelenting scrutiny. Material possessions mattered little against the loss of respect. African wisdom teaches that honor carries more weight than wealth. They learned this bitterly. Each glance from someone they had once considered beneath notice reminded them that betrayal leaves a mark heavier than gold or silver. They were forced to carry their misdeeds openly, a lesson both painful and irreversible. The nurse, who had seen what others ignored, received quiet honor. No ceremony heralded her courage, no grand speech praised her vigilance. Yet her recognition was deep and enduring. Colleagues, patients, and even the woman herself acknowledged the weight of her actions in hushed tones and respectful glances. In African tradition, the humility of the truthful often speaks louder than applause. She became a symbol of integrity, a living reminder that those who stand for what is right, even quietly, hold a power greater than the loudest voices of deceit. The woman, fully aware now of the betrayal she had survived, chose dignity over revenge. She felt the sweetness of retribution whispering at the edges of her heart, but she refused to let bitterness shape her. Her restraint became her strength. By not striking back, she achieved a moral victory far greater than any retaliation could offer. She reclaimed her identity, her voice, and her place in the world without lowering herself to the level of those who had plotted against her. Life, justice, and honor intertwined as she stepped forward, a testament to the resilience and wisdom that African tales carry across generations. The woman stood at the edge of her own life, looking at the home she had once shared, the halls that echoed with whispered betrayals, and the windows that reflected both her sorrow and her resilience. She took a slow breath, feeling the warmth of the sun through the tall city buildings, as if the ancestors themselves had bent the light to touch her. Her name, once spoken in quiet pity, was now uttered with respect. She reclaimed it fully, allowing it to carry the weight of her journey, the dignity that could not be stolen, and the wisdom gleaned from her trial. Wealth, long a measure of worth in the eyes of others, became a tool in her hands, a means to support, to guide, and to rebuild, not a goal of vanity. Her voice, once silenced by the hands of betrayal, now rose to instruct, to counsel, and to protect. It was a voice that others turned to, a living river of guidance flowing through the city that had once looked away. The streets themselves seemed to listen as the community reflected on its hastiness and judgment. Those who had gossiped, who had whispered approval of greed or misread silence as weakness, now understood the depth of patience. Silence, once misinterpreted, was revealed as a strength, a quiet armor that protected, nurtured, and waited for the right moment. Conversations shifted from blame to understanding. Lessons were shared openly, eyes meeting eyes with acknowledgement of moral responsibility. A collective awakening unfolded, subtle but profound, as the city remembered that power often lies in restraint, patience, and truth. Tradition, twisted by selfish ambition, now found its rightful place once more. Elders spoke, not to command, but to remind. Their words were steeped in wisdom and memory, restoring cultural values that had been bent for convenience. They guided the community back to principles that endured, lessons carved from generations of experience. Misused sayings, half-quoted proverbs, and convenient interpretations were replaced by the full weight of ancestral insight. The city learned that tradition is a living force, to be nurtured, respected, and protected, rather than weaponized for greed or fear. Fate, patient and invisible, completed its circle without fanfare. Justice settled quietly, not in shouting or violent retribution, but in the natural unfolding of balance. The husband and his accomplice were left with the weight of their choices. The woman moved forward with dignity. Life, restored, flowed steadily, touching those around her and reminding all that the universe favors integrity and the careful hand of moral order. The streets returned to their rhythm, but the echo of justice lingered, a reminder that African belief holds. True reparation does not need noise to be felt. Finally, the story found its mark in memory, not stone. The lessons were carried in hearts and minds rather than in monuments or proclamations. The grave dug for another became instruction for all who witnessed it. Deceit destroys the self, patience yields power, and silence may shield until the time is right. Children listened, neighbors remembered, and the tale passed through the oral tradition, like fire from one hand to another. In every whispered recounting, the community preserved not just events but wisdom, ensuring that the woman's journey, the reclaiming of honor, and the triumph of truth would guide generations to come. In this way, life, justice, and memory intertwined, a testament to African tales, enduring, instructive, and filled with the quiet power of resilience.